Well, good evening. Welcome to our Wednesday night Bible study as we continue into the Old Testament. Today we will finish, hopefully, the book of Genesis as it lays open for us the beginning of the book of Exodus. Over the last couple of weeks, we've been looking at the patriarchs. We've looked at Abraham and Isaac, and we were finishing Jacob's story as it moves into the story of Joseph and his brothers. And last week, we kind of ended with Jacob wrestling with God, or wrestling with God, and afterwards gets a new name. And one of the things I want us to kind of step back and see is that this story parallels in many ways the other story, because they both occur in Bethel. They both occur as Jacob is moving away from and towards Esau. The first one is when Jacob is moving away from Esau. He's running away and he has a dream. And there God blesses him. Here, it is on his way to meet his brother. His brother that he has stolen not only a birthright but a blessing from. And he knows that this may not go well. And it is in this, he sends all of the family ahead of him. He stays behind. And it is nighttime, it is dark, and he wrestles, not knowing who the other person is. And one of the things in the Old Testament that we'll see over and over again is that we're told that you are not to look on the face of God. So it is nighttime, and there's the danger because he will not relent that the sun could come up. And he could see God, but he doesn't know exactly who he's wrestling. Maybe he's wrestling his brother. And within the story, we also see that the wrestler, the one that has come to wrestle him, is not able to get away from what? Jacob's grip. And he finally has to what? Touches him and he lets go. Because he is holding on to him. He knows that it's God and he's asking for another blessing. And one of the things we'll see within this story is because of this, Jacob is given a new name, the name Israel. And it is on his way as he is leaving to see his brother that this happens. Jacob was left alone. A man wrestled with him until daybreak. When the man saw that he did not prevail against him, he struck him on the hip socket, and Jacob's hip was put out of joint as he wrestled with him. Then he said, "Let me go, for the day is breaking." But Jacob said, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." So he said to him, "What is your name?" And he said to Jacob, Then the man said, "You shall no longer be called Jacob, but Israel, for you have striven with God and with humans and have prevailed." And Jacob asked him, "Please tell me your name." And he said, "Why is it that you ask my name?" And there he blessed him. So Jacob called the place Peniel. "For I've seen God face to face, and yet my life is preserved." The sun rose upon him as he passed, limping because of his hip. Therefore, to this day, the Israelites do not eat the thigh muscle that is in the hip socket, because he struck Jacob on the hip socket and the muscle. So now Jacob looked up after this has happened, and he sees Esau, his brother, coming towards him. And there are 400 men with him. So he divided the children among Leah and Rachel and the two maids, and he put his maids with their children in front, and Leah and her children, and Rachel and Joseph last of all. He himself went on ahead of them, bowing himself to the ground 7 times until he came near his brother. But Esau ran to meet him, embraced him, and fell on his neck and kissed him and wept. When Esau looked up and saw the women and the children, he said, "Who are these with you, Jacob?" And Jacob said, "The children whom God has graciously given your servant." Then the maids drew near and their children and bowed down. Leah likewise, her children drew near, bowed down, and finally Joseph and Rachel drew near. They bowed down. And Esau said, "What do you mean by all this company that I met?" And Jacob answered, "To find favor with my Lord." But Esau said, "I have enough, my brother. Keep what you have for yourself." And Jacob said, No, please, if I find favor with you, then accept my present from my hand. For truly to see your face is like seeing the face of God, since you have received me with such favor. Please accept my gift that is brought to you, because God has dealt graciously with me, and because I have everything I want. So he urged him, and he took it. So this is the meeting of two brothers that we kind of wonder what's going to happen when they meet. There's a lot of anticipation. And they meet, and Esau does what we would not expect. We would expect that he's been stewing for years, seeking and waiting for what? Revenge. And Esau comes, and what Jacob will say is like, it is like me seeing the face of God. You have come and shown me what?
Forgiveness.
Forgiveness and grace and mercy. Now, one of the things we'll see through the rest of it is although they have this encounter, it will not be a full reconciliation. They will not have a relationship with each other. They will be two different parties that meet and depart again. From here, I want us to go over, we're going to kind of skip over a little bit. If you get time to read some of the other sections here, it's great. But I want us to start picking up with the story of Joseph tonight. So Jacob settled in the land where his father, this is chapter 37, had lived as an alien in the land of Canaan. And this is the story of the family of Jacob. Now Joseph, being 17 years old, was shepherding the flock with his brothers. So what are they? They're shepherds. So we're introduced with Joseph and his brothers in this story here, and we see them as shepherds. And he was helper to the sons of Bilhah and Zilpah, the father's wives, and Joseph brought a bad report of them to their father. So Joseph is 17. We know that he is, outside of Benjamin, who is the youngest, he is the one who is the youngest. And we know he's the only son within the story right here of Rachel. And we know that Jacob loves Rachel more than Leah and more than the handmaids. He's shepherding, and the two concubines' sons, he's helping them, and he comes back and tells Daddy, they're up to no good. What is he doing? He's tattling. So we're introduced to Joseph as a young person who's a shepherd, who's working with his brothers, and the first thing we see him do is go and tattle. That should give us a cue of the personality of Joseph. Y'all remember when you were younger? Do you remember the tattletales?
Never.
Yeah. I don't know what it is about younger kids that tattle a lot, but it's like they feel like they've never done anything wrong. Now Israel loved Joseph more than the other of his children, because he was the son of his old age, and he made him a long robe with sleeves. So now we know that he's not only one that rats on his brothers, but now we know that he's the favorite. So much of the favorite that he has been given a very nice robe. Now you can imagine, you've been a part of families, what's it like to have a sibling who is a favorite? It's not easy, is it? But when his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brothers, they hated him and could not speak peaceably to him. Because of the father's love for the child, the brothers, it breeds hate in their lives, to the point they can't even talk with him. So we get the context of Joseph in his family, as already there is tension within the family unit. And now we hear of Joseph. Once Joseph had a dream, and when he told it to his brothers, they hated him even more. He said to them, "Listen to this dream that I dreamed. They were binding sheaves in the field. Suddenly my sheaf rose and stood upright. Then your sheaves gathered around it and bowed down to my sheaf." And his brothers said to him, Are you indeed to reign over us? Are you indeed to have dominion over us? So they hated him even more because of his dreams and his words. So now Joseph not only has a dream, but he doesn't have the ability to know that saying it is going to cause problems for other people. Sometimes when you know you're special, it's okay, but when you start promoting it, it causes problems. They already hate him. Now they hate him even more. He had another dream and told it to his brothers. Look, I have another dream. The sun, the moon, the 11 stars were bowing down to me. When he told it to his father and to his brothers, his father rebuked him and said, what kind of dream is this that you have had? Shall we indeed come, and I and your mother and your brothers bow to the ground before you? So his brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept the matter in mind. Can you imagine sitting at the table with the family in the evening and having one saying these kind of things? Now his brothers went to pasture their father's flock near Shechem. And Israel said to Joseph, are not your brothers pasturing the flock at Shechem? Come, I will send you to them. He answered, here I am. So he said to him, go now and see if it is well with your brothers and with the flock, and bring word back to me. So he sent him from the valley of Hebron. He came to Shechem, and a man found him wandering in the fields. And the man asked, what are you seeking? I am seeking my brothers. He said, tell me, please, where are they pasturing the flock? And the man said, they have gone away, for I heard them say, let us go to Dothan. So Joseph went after his brothers and found them at Dothan. And they saw him from a distance, and before he came near, they conspired to kill him. I want you to put yourself in Joseph's place here just for a moment. Joseph sees his brothers. He's obviously oblivious to how he makes other people feel. And he's probably got a little goofy grin going on, just waving at his brothers. And this is the way I imagine the story. And his brothers, seeing him far away, are conspiring, figuring out, how can we kill him? They said to one another, here comes this dreamer. Come now, let us kill him and throw him into one of the pits. Then we shall say that a wild animal has devoured him, and we shall see what will become of his dreams. They are like Cain when God comes to Cain and says, why are you so upset? Sin is lurking, ready to devour you. They're standing in the place of Cain. But Reuben heard of it, and he delivered him out of his hand, saying, let us not take his life. Reuben said to them, shed no blood, throw him into the pit here in the wilderness. But lay no hand on him, that he might rescue him out of their hand and restore him to his father. So Reuben says, let's not kill him. Let's just throw him here in this pit, with the hope of, I'll save him later. So when Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped him of his robe, the long robe with sleeves that he wore, and they took him and threw him into a pit. The pit was empty, there was no water in it. So they throw him down in the pit, and as Reuben's gone off to do whatever Reuben's doing, the brothers sit down to eat. Now, can you imagine Joseph walks up to his brothers? They tear his robe off, they throw him in the pit. And as he's gaping with his mouth open on what in the world's happening, they sit down to eat. What kind of person can sit down to eat after they've just done that to their brother? They feel pretty good about what they're doing. That's how much that they just don't like their brother. Then they sat down to eat, and looking up, they saw a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead, and their camels carrying gum and balm and resin on their way to carry it down to Egypt. Then Judah said to his brothers, what profit is it if we kill our brother and conceal his blood? So one brother has an idea. We can make some money off of this. Come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, not lay hands on him, for he is our brother, our own flesh. And his brothers agreed. And when some Midianite traders passed by, they drew Joseph up, lifting him out of the pit, sold him to the Ishmaelites for 20 pieces of silver. And they took Joseph to Egypt. So can you imagine Joseph begins the day with his father saying, go look after your brothers. By the end of the day, he's being sold as a slave to go to Egypt. I mean, one of the things I want us to do as we follow the story of Joseph is, how would you respond? How would you respond if your brother sold you? I mean, is his sin against his brothers worth this? Now Reuben returned to the pit and saw that Joseph was not in the pit. He tore his clothes. He returned to his brothers and said, the boy is gone, and where can I turn? And they took Joseph's robe, slaughtered a goat, dipped the robe in the blood, and had the robe with sleeves taken to their father. And they said, this we have found. See now whether it is your son's robe or not. And he recognized it. It is my son's robe. A wild animal has devoured him. Joseph, without doubt, is torn to pieces. Then Jacob tore his garments, put sackcloth on his loins, and mourned for his son for many days. And all of his sons and all of his daughters sought to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted, and said, no, I shall go down to Sheol to my son mourning. Thus his father bewailed him. Meanwhile, the Midianites sold him in Egypt to Potiphar, one of Pharaoh's officials, the captain of the guard. So Reuben comes back and finds out what the brothers has done. And one of the things we see within the story, even with Reuben's awareness of what has happened, he nor none of his brothers tell their father the truth. They cover up what they'd done by essentially bringing the robe to their father with goat's blood on it and said he must have been devoured by a wild animal. And in their father's torment, they try to comfort him. But not one of them tells him the truth.
So I've always questioned, because it doesn't really say in the scripture whether Reuben knew what the brothers did.
Yeah.
I assume he does. They probably fill him in on what happened, but he goes to find them and comes back,
Yeah.
and he tears his clothes in mourning because he feels like he failed his brother because he didn't rescue him. But
we don't know, but what we kind of gather throughout the rest of the narrative is that for one reason or another, they have conspired to hold the truth.
Right, but I'm just thinking from Reuben's innocence within all of this.
Yeah. We don't know. I mean, it doesn't say one way or the other, but at some point one would wonder how you would keep such a secret.
Well,
between
it
brothers.
just seems to me that they probably didn't tell Reuben the whole story because he was the one that wanted to save Joseph's life. So I don't think they would trust him with the full story, knowing that he was the weak link and may run to Dad and tell Dad what they did. So my gut feeling from reading this is that they probably told him the same story they told Dad. That, here's the robe and it was probably a wild animal, and let him think that.
But Reuben knew that they just threw him down the well.
The pit.
And it said that they sat down to eat, and while they were eating, that's when the Israelites were coming.
Well, the Ishmaelites came first. That gave them the idea. Then they sell them to the Midianites.
And they said, let's make some money.
Yeah, either way.
There when they had the
Reuben
meal.
wasn't
Yeah.
there when they sold him to the
Reuben wasn't there when they
Yeah.
had the meal?
No.
Where was he at?
He left. Yeah, whatever the case is the brothers in effect. I mean, even still, Reuben didn't stop him from throwing him in the pit. Reuben still got some blood on his hands. I mean, even with the idea, he didn't stand up to them and say, over my dead body, are you going to do this?
Mhm.
So as far as he knows, he was in the pit, and the next time he looked, he wasn't.
He probably feared he'd be in the pit too.
So.
Oldest brother?
I can't remember. I think Judah, let's see. we'll have to go back. There's a,
I missed that.
yeah. We kind of skipped over some of the let's see, Reuben was the firstborn, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, and Zebulun. Those were the sons of Leah. Then the sons of Rachel were Joseph and Benjamin. The sons of Bilhah, Rachel's maid, was Dan and Naphtali. And the sons of Zilphiah, Leah's maids, were Gad and Asher. These were the sons of Jacob who were born to him. So that was the end of 35. We have an interlude in the next chapter that kind of tells a different story outside of the Joseph narrative. And it's kind of an interesting story, so I don't want us to jump over it. And it's a really neat story, and it's one that I've used several times in other Bible studies. So Judah's kind of the one that starts. So one of the things that Genesis does is let us know that these 12 who represent what will become the 12 tribes of Israel, these brothers aren't perfect at all. And God still uses this family. It happened at that time that Judah went down from his brothers and settled near a certain Adullamite whose name was Hira. There Judah saw the daughter of a certain Canaanite woman whose name was Shua. He married her and went to her, and she conceived and bore a son, and he named her He named him Ur. Then again she conceived and bore a son whom she named Onan. Yet again she bore a son, and she named him Shelah. And she was in Shebeb when she bore him. Judah took a wife for Ur, his firstborn. Her name was Tamar. So as the sons got older, Judah goes out and finds a wife. The wife's Tamar. But Ur, Judah's firstborn, was wicked in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord put him to death. Then Judah said to Onan, "Go into your brother's wife and perform the duty of a brother-in-law to her. Raise up offspring for your brother." So in Israel's ancient tribal traditions, if a woman was married and had no children, she could not continue the future for the man. So the only way to get a future for the man in this society was for the brother to come along and stand in the place of the deceased to bear a child that would be the child of the deceased person, so that child could continue that person's future with their inheritance, with their blessing, with all the things that go to it. It also kept the woman from being vulnerable in society. Well, Onan takes her, but since Onan knew that her offspring would not be his, he spilled his semen on the ground whenever he went into his brother's wife, so that he would not give offspring to his brother. So not only does he not want to have children, he still wants to have relations with her, but not give her what the Father has asked. What he did was displeasing in the sight of the Lord, and he put him to death also. Then Judah said to his daughter-in-law Tamar, "Remain a widow in your father's house until my son Shelah grows up, for he feared that he too would die like his brothers." So Tamar went to live in her father's house. So Tamar goes and lives back with her father with the promise that when Shelah grows up, you can marry him and you can have children with him and inherit all the good stuff. In course of time, the wife of Judah, Shua's daughter, died. When Judah's time of mourning was over, he went up to Timnah to his sheep shearers, and he and his friend Hira the Adullamite. When Tamar was told, "Your father-in-law is going up to Timnah to shear sheep," she put off her widow's garment, put on a veil, wrapped herself up, and sat down at the entrance of Enam, which is on the road to Timnah. So Judah's wife has died. And at the first opportunity, he's going to go meet up with some of his old buddies and go carousing. Tamar hears this, takes off her widow's garment, and puts on, let's just say, a very revealing outfit. And she goes and sits at the edge of town. She saw that Shelah was grown up, yet she had not been given to him. When Judah saw her, he thought her to be a prostitute, for she had covered her face. He went over to her at the roadside and said, "Come, let me come into you." For he did not know that she was his daughter-in-law. And she said, "What will you give me that you may come into me?" And he answered, "I will send you a kid from the flock." And she said, "Only if you give me a pledge until you send it." He said, "What pledge shall I give you?" She replied, "Your signet and your cord and the staff that is in your hand." So he gave them to her, and he went into her, and she conceived by him. Then she got up and went away, and taking off her veil, she put on the garment of her widowhood. So she has tricked, another trickster story, she has tricked Judah. Judah thinks that he's laid with a prostitute. He offers her a goat, but I don't have it on me. What am I going to do? She says, "Give me your signet, your ring, and some other things that will identify you." This would be like, "Give me your driver's license. If you don't return it, I'll have this as collateral." She leaves, returns back to who she normally is. When Judah sent the kid by his friend to the Amalekite to recover the pledge from the woman, he couldn't find her. He asked the townspeople, "Where is the temple prostitute who was at Enon by the wayside?" "Sorry, sir, there's no prostitute here." So he turned to Judah and said, "I have not found her. Moreover, the townspeople said, 'There's no prostitute has ever been here.' And Judah replied, 'Let her keep the things as her own. Otherwise, we might be laughed at. You see, I sent this kid and you could not find her.' About 3 months later, Judah was told, 'Your daughter-in-law Tamar has played the whore. Moreover, she is pregnant as a result of her whoredom.' Now, Judah has not cared one bit about Tamar. He has lied to her. He has kept Shelah from her, but he gets word that she's pregnant. And she shouldn't be having any relation with anybody outside of his family. As she was being brought out, she sent word to her father-in-law. Is this the owner of these who made me pregnant?" And she said, "Take note, please. Whose are these? The signet and the cord and the staff." So as he's about to rail into her, she shows her hand. And Judah acknowledged them and said, "She is more in the right than I, since I did not give her to my son Shelah." And he did not lie with her again. When the time came for her delivery, she had twins in her womb. And while she was in labor, one put out a hand, and the midwife took it and bound on its hand a crimson thread, saying, "This one came out first." But then she drew back his hand, and the other came out, his brother, and said, "What a breach you have made for yourself." Therefore he was named Perez. And afterward his brother came out with the crimson thread on his hand, and he was named Zerah. One of the things you'll see as you read more into the genealogy of Israel's history is Perez is an ancestor of David, who was an ancestor of Ruth. And those are stories about women who don't allow men to make their future for them. And it's just an interesting story, but it's one that Genesis kind of squeezes in there, in between these stories of brothers. Now Joseph was taken down to Egypt, and Potiphar, and an officer of Potiphar, the captain of the guard. So we kind of know this story, so I'm not going to go into too much detail of reading it, but let's just kind of play the story out in our heads. Joseph has been sold into slavery. He finds himself into a house of Potiphar, and over time he rises in the ranks to the point that he becomes essentially second in charge of the house after the master of the house and the master's wife. Now Joseph is young and he's good looking. And Potiphar's wife wants him. Now, one of the things we see over and over, whether it's the story of Judah and Tamar, whether it's going back to the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, whether there's other stories, is that when people look at other people as not human, but something to be consumed, it's not right. Most stories we read, it is the man who takes advantage of the woman. In this story, it is a woman who looks at Joseph and lusts after him to the point that she essentially gives him the option. You either sleep with me, or I'll tell my husband that you slept with me anyway. And the question becomes, what kind of person is Joseph going to be? Will Joseph do the right thing, given the situation, or will he do the wrong thing? Will he be like his father Jacob, or even be like his grandfather and great-grandfather, and try to save his own life? Abraham tries to tell everybody Sarah's his wife. He tries to save his life. What will he do? He does the right thing. For doing the right thing, Potiphar hears of this and ends up sending him to jail. When his master heard the words that his wife spoke to him, "This is the way your servant has treated me," he became enraged. Joseph's master took him and put him into prison and placed where the king's prisoners were confined. And he remained there in prison. But the Lord was with Joseph and showed him steadfast love. He gave him favor in sight of the chief jailer. And the chief jailer committed to Joseph's care all the prisoners who were in the prison. And whatever was done there, he was the one who did it. And the chief jailer paid no heed to anything that was in Joseph's care, because the Lord was with him. And whatever he did, the Lord made it prosperous. So we're hearing a story about a man who is living under an empire as a slave. Part of us, what I want us to hear, is that this story in many ways parallels later stories of those like Daniel. Daniel lives in Babylon. Daniel lives to serve another king. Daniel will interpret dreams. As Israel is writing their stories down for the first time in written form after the Babylonian exile, it comes after their own fresh experience of being what? People in a strange land having to work for another master. So Joseph and later Daniel and others will give us an awareness. How do you survive living in that kind of world? You do your job, and you do it well. Now there's some time had went by, and in prison there was a cupbearer of the king and his baker, and both had defended their lord, the king of Egypt. Pharaoh was angry with his two officers, the chief cupbearer and the chief baker. He put them into custody in the house of the captain of the guard in the prison where Joseph was confined. The captain of the guard charged Joseph with them, and he waited on them, and they continued for some time in custody. So can you imagine being a slave, a servant, not only outside of prison, but now inside of prison? You're waiting on other prisoners. That's Joseph's job. Doesn't get any lower than that. So he's waiting on these guys, and one night they both dreamed. The cupbearer and the baker and the king of Egypt, who were confined in the prison. Each of his own dream, and each dream with its own meaning. When Joseph came to them in the morning, he saw they were troubled. So he asked Pharaoh's officers who were with them in custody of the master's house, why are your faces cast down? They said to him, we have had dreams, and there is no one to interpret them. And Joseph said to them, do not interpretations belong to God? Please tell them to me. So in prison, these cupbearers don't have the luxury of going out to Egypt's soothsayers, magicians, to find out what their dreams mean. All they've got stuck with is Joseph. Later we'll find when Pharaoh has dreams, he seeks counsel for others and they can't explain it. And Joseph goes ahead and tells them interpretations only belong to God. We'll find out later that only God, through Joseph, is able to interpret real dreams. He's the authentic deal compared to the imitations later. So the chief cupbearer told his dream to Joseph. In my dream there was a vine before me, and on the vine there were 3 branches. And as soon as it budded, its blossoms came out, and the clusters ripened into grapes. Pharaoh's cup was in my hand. I took the grapes, pressed them into Pharaoh's cup, and placed the cup in Pharaoh's hand. Joseph said to him, this is the interpretation. The 3 branches are 3 days. Within 3 days, Pharaoh will lift up your head and restore you to your office, and you shall place Pharaoh's cup in the hand, just as you used to do when you were his cupbearer. But remember me when it is well with you. Please do me the kindness to make mention of me to Pharaoh, and so to get me out of this place. For in fact, I was stolen out of the land of the Hebrews, and here I also have done nothing that they should put me into this dungeon. The chief baker saw that the interpretation was favorable. He said to Joseph, I have had a dream. There were 3 cake baskets on my head, and in the uppermost basket there were all sorts of baked food for Pharaoh, but the birds were eating out of it and out of the basket on my head. Joseph answered, this is the interpretation. The 3 baskets are 3 days. Within 3 days, Pharaoh will lift up your head from you and hang you on a pole, and the birds will eat the flesh from you. On the 3rd day, which was Pharaoh's birthday, he made a feast for all his servants, lifted up the head of the chief cupbearer and the head of the chief baker among his servants. He restored the chief cupbearer to his cupbearings. He placed the cup in Pharaoh's hand, but the chief baker he hanged, just as Joseph had interpreted to them. Yet the chief cupbearer did not remember Joseph, but forgot him. So we hear this story of Joseph interpreting dreams through the power of God, and even still, as he does good to others, he's still forgotten. Just imagine you're Joseph in prison, doing the right thing over and over again and suffering. After 2 whole years, Pharaoh dreamed. He was standing by the Nile. There came up to the Nile 7 sleek and fat cows. They grazed in the reed grass. Then 7 other cows, ugly and thin, came up out of the Nile after them, stood by the other cows on the bank of the Nile. The ugly and the thin cows ate up the 7 sleek and fat cows, and Pharaoh awoke. Then he fell asleep and dreamed a second time. 7 ears of grain, plump and good and growing on the stalk. Then 7 ears, thin and blighted by the east wind, sprouted after them. The thin ears swallowed up the 7 plump and full ears. Pharaoh awoke, and it was a dream. In the morning his spirit was troubled, so he sent and called all the magicians of Egypt and all his wise men. Pharaoh told his dreams, but there was no one who could interpret them to Pharaoh. As you go back and read maybe the story of Daniel, you'll see some of the similarities between these kind of stories. There is nobody in all of Egypt, later it'll be nobody in all of Babylon, who can tell the king what he needs to hear. Then the chief cupbearer said to Pharaoh, I remember my fault today. Once Pharaoh was angry with his servant, put me and the chief baker into custody, so on and so on. We had the dream, so on and so on. He interpreted it to us. I was restored to my office, and the baker was hanged. The Pharaoh sent for Joseph, and he was hurriedly brought out of the dungeon. When he had shaved himself, changed his clothes, he came in before Pharaoh. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, I have had a dream. There's no one who can interpret it. I have heard it said of you that when you hear a dream, you can interpret it. Now you got to imagine, how desperate is the king? Very desperate. He is scraping the bottom of the barrel. He grabs somebody out of a dungeon just to figure out. I mean, he's not sleeping. These dreams are keeping him awake. He knows something it is. It is not I. God will give Pharaoh a favor answer. So beginning in both of these, Joseph lets him know it is not I. It is God. When we get back into the Exodus story and Moses comes up in front of Pharaoh, it is not I, it is God. Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, in my dream, so he retells the story. Joseph said in verse 25, Joseph said to Pharaoh, Pharaoh's dreams are one and the same. God has revealed to Pharaoh that he is about to do 7 good cows are 7 years, and the 7 good ears are 7 years, and the dreams are one. The 7 lean and ugly came up after them and are 7 years of empty ears blighted by the east wind. They are 7 years of famine. It is as I told Pharaoh, God has shown to Pharaoh what he is about to do. There will come 7 years of great plenty throughout the land of Egypt, and there will rise 7 years of famine. So if we've read this story, we know the story. Pharaoh puts Joseph in charge of making sure that there are preparations during the good times to store excess for the lean years. And what we know through the story is that Egypt is able to secure enough that they can make money off of the excess. And people will come to Egypt and they will sell all they have for what? Food. There's some underlying commentary about what kingdoms are like. Kingdoms will take advantage of any opportunity to do what?
Make wealth.
Make wealth. But he takes this person from a dungeon and essentially puts him in charge of the future of Egypt. And as you read, we see that Joseph continues to rise in all of these things. Pharaoh put in Joseph's hand, he arrayed him in garments and fine linen, put a gold chain around his neck, hid him right in the chariot of his second in command, and they cried out in front of him, "Bow the knee." Thus he set him over all the land of Egypt. Moreover, Pharaoh said to Joseph, "I am Pharaoh, and without your consent no one shall lift a hand or a foot in all the land of Egypt." Pharaoh gave Joseph the name Zephon-Phanani, and he gave him Asenath, daughter of Potipharah, priest of Onan, as his wife. Thus Joseph gained authority over the land of Egypt. So Joseph's renamed with an Egyptian name. Joseph was 30 years old when he entered the service of Pharaoh the king. So as we continue to read the story, we see that these plentiful years, Joseph makes extra precautions for the lean years, and over time, famine begins, after those 7 good years, famine begins to spread over the land of Egypt and around Egypt. And that leads us to the story of Jacob and his family. When Jacob learned that there was grain in Egypt, he said to his sons, "Why do you keep looking at one another?" So we can imagine in an ancient world, and even today, when food is scarce, you start running out of ideas on how to what? Feed the family. And in the ancient world, starvation is common. I mean, if things don't go well, if there's pestilence, if there's famine, if there's no rain, there's no food. You can pick up and move, but you can only move so far without food. Word comes that there is food in Egypt. Why do you keep looking at each other, boys? So 10 of Joseph's brothers went down to buy grain in Egypt. But Jacob did not send Joseph's brother Benjamin with his brothers, for he feared that harm might come to him. So we see that Benjamin in his old age is still what? He's still got some PTSD from his son's death, to the point he won't let his younger son leave, the other son of Rachel. Rachel has died after childbirth with Benjamin. Thus the sons of Israel were among the other people who came to buy grain for the famine that had reached the land of Canaan. Now Joseph was governor of all the land, and it was he who sold to all the people of the land. And Joseph's brothers came and bowed themselves before him, their faces to the ground. So just imagine, we've already asked other questions. How is Esau going to deal with his brother Jacob? We know, going back to Cain and Abel, how things work out. If you had been Joseph, when you went to bed every night and thought about your brothers, what thoughts would you have? Let's just be honest.
Until he got in that really good position, he probably hated him.
He was probably angry.
Yeah.
But once he got in that position, he was like, hey, they did me a favor.
Yeah, that turned out good for me.
But even still, whether even if it's not hate or animosity, there's still that kind of sense of,
Betrayal.
yeah, these are the people that loved me. And they did evil. They were supposed to love me, did evil to me. So we as the audience want to know what's going to happen. You can imagine sitting around the fires, hearing these stories orally, and maybe it's the first time you really listen to it and hear it. And you've got brothers and you've got sisters, and you wonder. Although Joseph had recognized his brothers, they didn't recognize him. Joseph also remembered the dreams that he had dreamed about them. And he said to them, "You are spies. You have come to see the nakedness of the land." They said, "No, my lord. Your servants have come to buy food. We are all sons of one man. We are honest men. Your servants have never been spies." But he said to them, "No, you have come to see the nakedness of the land." They said, "We, your servants, are 12 brothers, the sons of a certain man in the land of Canaan. The youngest, however, is now with our father, and one is no more." But Joseph said to them, "It is just as I have said to you, you are spies. Here is how you shall be tested as Pharaoh lives. You shall not leave this place unless your youngest brother comes here." Now Joseph does something that is part of his family's heritage. His mother and his father. He plays the trickster. And we wonder, what is his motivation? He tells them, "You have come as spies to see what you can do in our land." And they profess, no, we're not. And he says, "You're not going to leave here until I know that you have a younger brother. Let one of you go, bring your brother, while the rest of you remain in prison, in order that your words may be tested, whether there is truth in you or else. As Pharaoh lives, surely you're spies." So he put them all together in prison for 3 days. You can imagine these brothers sitting in jail for 3 days. And them talking and starting to ask the question, why is this happening to us? And some of them probably saying, it's probably because of our sin. It's come back to get us. On the 3rd day, Joseph said to them, "Do this and you will live, for I fear God. If you are honest men, let one of your brothers stay here while you are in prison. The rest of you shall go and carry grain to the famine for your household, and bring your youngest brother to me. Thus your words will be verified." They agreed. They said to one another, "Alas, we are paying the penalty for what we did to our brother. We saw his anguish when he pleaded with us, but we would not listen. That is why this anguish has come upon us." Then Reuben answered them, "Did I not tell you not to wrong the boy? But you would not listen. So now there comes a reckoning of his blood." They did not know that Joseph understood them, since he spoke with them through an interpreter. He turned away from them and wept. And he returned and spoke to them. And he picked out Simeon and had him bound before their eyes. And Joseph gave orders to fill the bags with grain, to return every man's money to his sack, and give provisions for their journey. This was done for them. So they load up all of the stuff. As they're on their way back, one of them opened his sack to give his donkey fodder at the lodging place. He saw his money at the top of the sack. He said to his brothers, "My money has been put back. Here it is in my sack." At this they lost heart and turned trembling to one another, saying, "What is this that God has done to us?" Can you imagine the fear of knowing that you gave money and now it's back in your sack? What if they find out? They've got our brother in jail. They want our other brother. They think we're spies. Now they're going to think we're what? Thieves. Boy, Joseph's really putting it on them. When they came to their father Jacob in the land of Canaan, they told him all what had happened. The man, the Lord of the land, spoke harshly to us. But we said to them, "We are honest men. We are not spies. We are 12 brothers." They go through the story. As they were emptying their sacks, there in each one's sack was the bag of money. When they and their father saw their bundles of money, they were dismayed. Their father Jacob said to them, "I am the one you have bereaved of children. Joseph is no more, and Simeon is no more. And now you would take Benjamin? All this has happened to me." Then Reuben said to his father, "You may kill my 2 sons if I do not bring him back to you. Put him in my hands, and I will bring him back to you." But he said, my son shall not go down with you, for his brother is dead, and he is alone left. If harm should come to him on the journey that you are to make, you would bring down my gray hairs to Sheol. Now the famine was severe in the land, and they had eaten up the grain they had brought from Egypt. Their father had said, imagine old Simeon's waiting every day for his brothers to get back.
They don't seem to be in a hurry.
Jacob's not going to let them take Benjamin. Over my dead body, you're going to take my son. You got, So Simeon, he's already written Simeon off. He's no more. So they eat all the food, and now they don't have anything else. Go again, buy us a little more food. But Judah said, the man solemnly warned us, saying, you shall not see my face unless your brother is with you. If you will send our brother with us, we will go down and buy you food. But if you will not send him, we shall not go and get food, for this man said to us. They're like, you're not listening, Dad. There's no food without our brother Benjamin. Israel said, why do you treat me so badly as to tell the man that you had another brother? They replied, the man questioned us carefully about ourselves and our kindred. Is your father still alive? Have you another brother? What we told him was an answer to these questions. Could we in any way know that he would say, bring your brother? Then Judah said to his father, send the boy with me, and let us be on our way, so that we may live and not die, and you and we and our little ones. I myself will be shortly for him. You can hold me accountable. If I do not bring him back to you and set him before you, then let me bear the blame forever. If we had not delayed, we would now have returned twice. Then their father Israel said to them, if it is must be, then do. Take some of the choice fruits of the land in your bags. Carry them down as a present. Little balm, little honey, gum, resin, pistachio nuts, almonds. Carry back with you the money that was returned in the top of the sacks. Perhaps it was an oversight. Take your brother also. And may God Almighty grant you mercy before the man, that he may send back your other brother and Benjamin. As for me, I am bereaved of my children. I am bereaved. So Jacob is essentially giving over everything he loves for the future of his other children. When Joseph saw Benjamin with them, he said to his steward of his house, bring the men into the house and slaughter an animal and make ready for the men, or to dine with me at noon. The man did as Joseph said and brought the men to Joseph's house. Now the men were afraid because they were brought to Joseph's house and said, it is because of the money replaced in our sacks the first time that he is brought in, so that he may have an opportunity to fall upon us, to make slaves of us and take our donkeys. So they went up to the steward of Joseph's house and spoke to him in the entrance of the house. And they said, oh, my Lord, we came down the first time to buy food. And when we came to the lodging place, we opened our sacks, and there was each other's money in the top of the sacks. Our money is in full weight, so we brought it back with us. Moreover, we brought additional money to buy food. We did not know who put our money in our sacks. He replied, rest assured, do not be afraid. Your God and the God of your father must put treasure in your sacks for you. I received your money. Then he brought Simeon out to them. And when the steward had brought the men into Joseph's house, given them water, washed their feet, and when they had given the donkeys fodder, they made the present ready for Joseph's coming at noon, for they had heard that he would dine there. And when Joseph came home, they brought him the present. They carried it to the house and bowed to the ground before him. He inquired about their welfare. Is your father well? The old man whom you spoke of, is he still alive? They said, your servant, your father is well. He's still alive. They bowed their heads and they did obeisance. And when he looked up and saw his brother Benjamin, his mother's son, and said, is this your youngest brother of whom you spoke to me? God be gracious to you, my son. With that, Joseph hurried out because he was overcome with affection for his brother. And he was about to weep. First time he lays eyes on his full brother. We can only imagine Joseph sees in him his mom. And at this moment, he's overcome with emotion. And he runs out of the room. So he went into a private room. He wept there. He washed his face and came out, and controlling himself, he said, serve the meal. They served him by himself, and they by themselves, and the Egyptians who ate with him by themselves, because the Egyptians could not eat with the Hebrews, for this is an abomination to the Egyptians. And they were seated before him, the firstborn according to the birthright, the youngest according to the youth. The men looked at one another in amazement. Portions were taken to them from Joseph's table, but Benjamin's portions was 5 times as much as theirs. So they drank, and they were merry with him. Then he commanded the stewards of the house, fill the men's sacks with food, as much as they can carry. Each man's money in the top of his sack. Put my cup, the silver cup, in the top of the sack of the youngest, with his money for grain. And he did as Joseph told him. And as soon as morning was light, they were there, and they sent away with their donkeys. When they had gone only a short distance from the city, Joseph said to his steward, go, follow after the men, and when you overtake them, say to them, why have you returned evil for good? Why would you have stolen my silver cup? It is not from this that my Lord drinks. Does he not intend to use it for divination? You have done wrong in doing this. So again, he's going to trick his brothers. And motivation, we have to ask, what is Joseph's end game? How much more will he stretch his brothers out? When he overtook them, he repeated the words to them. They said to him, why does my Lord speak with such words? For far be it from your servant that they should do such a thing. Look, the money we have found at the top of our sacks we brought back to you from the land of Canaan. Why would we steal silver or gold from your Lord's house? Should it be found with any one of your servants, let him die. Moreover, the rest of us will become my Lord's slaves. He said, even so, in accordance with your words, let it be. Be with it who found, become my slave, but the rest of you shall go free. Then each one quickly lowered his sack to the ground. He searched, beginning with the eldest, ending with the youngest. It was found in Benjamin's sack. At this they tore their clothes, and each one of them loaded his donkeys and returned to the city. Judah and his brothers came to Joseph's house while he was still there, and they fell to the ground before him. Joseph said to them, what deed is it that you have done? Do you not know that one such as I can practice divination? And Judah said, what can we say to my Lord? What can we speak? How can we clear ourselves? God has found out the guilt of our servants. Here we are then, my Lord's slaves, both we and the one in whose possession the cup has been found. But he said, far be it from me that I should do so. Only the one in whose possession the cup was found shall be my slave. But as for you, go out in peace to your father. This is a moment of redemption for the brothers. To Joseph, they would sell him as a slave and harm their father. For Benjamin, they know that if they go home without their brother, it will kill their father. One can be a slave and the rest go free. Judah stepped up to him and said, O my Lord, your servant, please speak a word in my Lord's ear, and do not be angry with your servant, for you are like Pharaoh himself. My Lord asked his servant, saying, have you a father or a brother? And we said to my Lord, we have a father, an old man, and a young brother, the child of his old age. His brother is dead. He alone is left of his mother's children, and his father loves him. Then you said to your servants, bring him down to me, so that I may set eyes on him. We said to the Lord, the boy cannot leave his father, for if he should leave his father, the father should die. Then you said to his servants, unless your youngest brother comes down with you, you shall see my face no more. And when we went back to your servant, my father, we told him the words of my Lord. And when our father said, go again, buy us a little food, we said, we cannot go down, only if our youngest brother goes with us. Will we go down, for we cannot see the man's face unless our youngest brother is with us? Then your servant, my father, said to us, you know that my wife bore me 2 sons. One left me, and I said, surely he has been torn to pieces, and I have never seen him since. If you take this one also from me, the harm comes to him, will bring down my gray hairs in sorrow to Sheol. Now therefore, When I come to your servant, my father, and this boy is not with us then, as his life is bound up in this boy's life, when he sees that this boy is not with us, he will die. And your servants will bring down his gray hairs of your servant, our father, with sorrow to Sheol. For your servant became surgery for the boy to my father, saying, if I do not bring him back to you, then I will bear the blame in the sight of my father of all my life. Now therefore, please, let your servant remain as a slave to my Lord in place of the boy. Judah redeems himself. He says, I'll switch places. And let the boy go back with his brother. For how can I go back to my father if the boy is not with me? I fear to see the suffering that would come upon my father. At hearing this, at hearing the brother who conspired against him, who sold him into slavery, whatever Joseph's motivations and plans were, stop. Joseph could no longer control himself because of all those who stood by him. He cried out, send everyone away from me. No one stayed with him when Joseph made himself known to his brothers. And he wept loudly that the Egyptians heard it, and the household of Pharaoh heard it. And Joseph said to his brothers, I am Joseph. Is my father still alive? But his brothers could not answer him. So dismayed were they at his presence. Can you imagine being those brothers? The very one you tried to kill and sell into slavery is now the one in charge of your fate. Joseph said to his brothers, come closer to me. They came closer. He said, I am your brother Joseph, whom you sold into Egypt. And now do not be distressed or angry with yourselves because you sold me here. For God sent me before you to preserve life. For the famine has been in the land for these 2 years, and there are 5 more years in which there will be neither plowing nor harvest. God sent me before you to preserve for you a remnant on the earth, and to keep alive for you many survivors. So it was not you who sent me here, but God. He has made me a father to Pharaoh and lord of all of his house and ruler over all the land of Egypt. Hurry and go to my father and say to him, thus says your son Joseph, God has made me lord over all of Egypt. Come down to me, do not delay. You shall settle in the land of Goshen. You shall be near me and your children and your children's children and all your flocks and your herds and all that you have. I will provide for you there, since there are 5 more years of famine to come. Now your eyes and the eyes of your brother Benjamin see that it is my own mouth that speaks to you. You must go tell my father how greatly I am honored in Egypt, and how you have seen. Hurry, bring my father down to me. Then he fell upon his brother's neck and wept, like Esau to Jacob. And while Benjamin wept upon his neck, and he kissed all his brothers, and he wept upon them, and after that his brothers talked with him. When report was heard in Pharaoh's house, Joseph's brothers have come. Pharaoh and his servants were pleased. Pharaoh said to Joseph, say to your brothers, do this, load your animals, go back to the land of Canaan, take your father and your household, come to me, and I will give you the best of the land of Egypt. You may enjoy the fat of the land. You are the further charged to say, do not take this wagon from the land of Egypt for your little ones and for your wives, and bring your father and come. Give no thought to your possessions, for the best of the land of Egypt is yours. And the son of Israel did so, and Joseph gave them wagons. So the brothers go back to their father, and as they get there, they get to their father Jacob in verse 25, and they told him, Joseph is still alive. He's even ruler over the land of Egypt. He was stunned. He could not believe them. But when they told him all the words that Joseph had said to them, he saw the wagons Joseph had sent to carry. The spirit of his father Jacob revived. Israel said, enough. My son Joseph is alive. I must go see him before I die. So Joseph brings his family to Egypt, and they are secure. So one of the questions is, how did the people get to Egypt? Famine in the land, Joseph's there to preserve the future of God's people. Joseph recognizes all the evil that has happened in his life, God has used for what? Good. There's parallel story in the parallel of Joseph as kind of a early model of what Jesus will be. And we'll talk more about that maybe at another time. So when you continue to read the story, chapter 46 is Jacob's, Israel's migration to Egypt, the people getting to the land. 46 and parts of 47 is Jacob's family entering the land of Egypt, getting ready to kind of settle. They begin to settle. They have their flocks and their horses and all the stuff that they need. And then, as Jacob is getting older, he begins to prepare for his death. And what he does is he ends up blessing the sons of Joseph. And we don't have a lot of time left, so I'll encourage you to read the story of chapter 47 and 48 and part of 49. And what we see here is as Jacob is seeing the end coming, he begins to do what his father did and Abraham does. He blesses the next generations. And Jacob blesses all of his 12 sons, and you can read those blessings there in 49. And by the end of chapter 49, the beginning of chapter 50, Jacob dies. And Joseph goes to bury his father with his brothers. And afterwards, the brothers begin to have questions and doubts. Now that our father is out of the picture, will Joseph still be as forgiving? We can just imagine, even after all of these good things have happened in their life, there's still this doubt that Joseph really has forgiven us. There's still this guilt and shame they are carrying around. The dreams that Joseph had as a child said to us that we would be his servants, his slaves. And so far within the narrative of reconciliation with the brothers, he has not done any of that. So the nagging question is, will it come to pass? Will he continue to forgive us? Or since our father is dead, will he now make us his servants and slaves?
Sounds like a guilty conscience.
In verse 15, realizing their father was dead, Joseph's brother says, "What if Joseph still bears a grudge against us and pays us back in full for all the wrong that we did to him?" So they approached Joseph saying, "Your father gave this instruction before he died." We don't know if he did or not. This is what they say. Say to Joseph, "I beg you, forgive the crime of your brothers and the wrong they did in harming you. Now, therefore, please forgive the crime of the servants of the God of your father." How will the story end? Will the story end in full reconciliation, or will it end in something else? Joseph wept when they spoke to him. His brothers also wept. They fell down before him and said, "We are here as your slaves." It appears that the dream has come true. But Joseph said to them, "Do not be afraid. Am I in the place of God? Even though you intended to do harm to me, God intended it for good in order to preserve a numerous people as he is doing today. So have no fear. I myself will provide for you and your little ones." In this way he reassured them, speaking kindly to them. In a sense, Joseph says, "Get up. Am I God? No. The only one you need to bow down to and to serve is God alone. Can I forgive you of your guilt and shame? No. Only God can do that. What he does is essentially say, I've given up on that dream of you being my servants. I will serve you. I will take care of you. I will make sure you have what you need because God has put me into this place for a purpose to keep the future of God's people alive. And to do anything other than that would be going against what God's will for Joseph and his family is. So when we read the bookends of stories about brothers, the first brothers end in murder and alienation. This story ends in forgiveness and reconciliation and a future. So Joseph remained in Egypt in his father's household, and Joseph lived 110 years. Joseph saw Ephraim's children of the third generation. The children of Machir, son of Manasseh, were also born on Joseph's knees. And Joseph said to his brothers, I'm about to die, but God will surely come to you and bring you up out of this land to the land he swore to Abraham, to Isaac, and Jacob. So Joseph made Israelites swear, saying, when God comes to you, you shall carry up my bones from here. And Joseph died, being 110 years old. He was embalmed and placed in a coffin in Egypt. That's the end of Genesis. Let me close this in prayer, and for those that are here, if you have questions, we can talk just for a couple of minutes. Let's pray. Holy God, we thank you. God, we thank you for the stories of Genesis we've read. We thank you for the stories of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob and Joseph and his brothers. If we're honest, we see ourselves in the stories. We see ourselves with much faith. We also see ourselves with much faults. And even in the in-between, you come and work in our lives for good. And God, each of us have had seasons where things have not gone well. We've had struggles and pains and hardships. And yet you work through all of those to help us to draw closer to you and to other people and to share your love. Lord, help us to model the kind of faith that Abraham possessed. Help us to model the kind of forgiveness that Joseph offers. And help us to continue to tell and remember these stories. For although they are stories from long, long ago, they are still alive. Be with us, guide us, bring us back together. We pray this in Christ's name. Amen.